US President Donald Trump says his administration will, quote, permanently pause migration from all, quote, third world countries. It follows the death of a soldier from injuries in an attack near the White House. Authorities say this was carried out by an Afghan national who had overstayed his visa. Mr. Trump says suspension will allow the system to recover from previous illegal admissions. He wants to remove anyone who is not a net asset to the United States. And Tony Watman is covering this story for CNA from Washington, D.C. Tony, what has President Trump revealed about his latest plans for immigration? How is he defining what he calls third world country?
Well, there was a lot of big attention-grabbing immigration headlines in this announcement, but he really offered no details on how he plans to implement these changes. As you mentioned, the president says that he's going to permanently pause immigration from what he describes as third world countries. He didn't say which countries that would include, but a starting point could be those 19.
All right. I need you to pay very close attention to what I'm about to tell you right now, because something just happened that could completely change the trajectory of Donald Trump's legal battles. And honestly, the way we think about presidential power in this country forever. The Supreme Court, the highest court in the land, just made a ruling that has essentially blown a massive hole in Trump's entire legal defense strategy. And before you say, wait, I thought the Supreme Court helped Trump with that immunity ruling, let me explain what's actually going on here, because the details matter. And the details are absolutely not what Trump wanted them to be. See, here's what a lot of people don't fully understand about that immunity decision that everyone was talking about. Yes, the Supreme Court ruled that presidents have broad immunity for official acts. That was a huge headline. That was what everyone in the media talked about for weeks. Trump claimed victory. His supporters celebrated like they had just won the Super Bowl. Case closed, right? But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest. You can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us, be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video.
Calling for extra security for the members involved.
This is perhaps the most reckless, irresponsible thing that he has done all Congress, and it's going to get a lot of us killed. We have kids.
The president want to execute members of Congress? No.
The White House firing back.
They're suggesting, Nancy, that the president has given illegal orders, which he has not. And to suggest and encourage that active duty service members defy the chain of command is a very dangerous thing for sitting members of Congress to do.
So very, very wrong. Because buried in that ruling, in the fine print that most people didn't bother to pay attention to, were limitations, boundaries, lines that even a president cannot cross, no matter how powerful they think they are. And now lower courts are using those exact limitations to push Trump's criminal cases forward in ways that should genuinely concern him. They're saying, okay, the Supreme Court told us presidents have immunity for official acts, but guess what? A whole lot of what Trump allegedly did doesn't actually qualify as official acts under any reasonable interpretation. And that means those actions can be prosecuted. That means a criminal trial can move forward. That means Trump's whole immunity defense just got ripped apart at the seams in a way his legal team never anticipated. And this is happening right now, not in some hypothetical future, not in some abstract legal debate among professors. Right now, in actual courtrooms, with actual judges, making actual rulings that are clearing the path toward a criminal trial. Now, here's why this is such a monumentally big deal that everyone should be paying attention to. Trump's entire legal strategy for years has been delay, delay, delay. Push everything past the election. Claim immunity for absolutely everything under the sun. Make the whole thing so complicated and drawn out that it just kind of fades away and people forget about it. And for a while, it honestly looked like that strategy was working beautifully. Cases got delayed indefinitely. Prosecutions got stalled in procedural quicksand. Trump won the election and returned to the White House with all the power that comes with it. Mission accomplished, right? But here's the thing about the legal system that Trump and his team seem to keep forgetting. It moves slow, but it doesn't stop. And those immunity limitations from the Supreme Court ruling, they're still there. They're still on the books. And judges are still applying them to actual cases. So even though Trump is sitting in the Oval Office right now, even though he has all the power and protection that comes with being president of the United States, the legal machinery is still grinding forward in the background, whether he likes it or not. And what's happening in the courts right now is that prosecutors and judges are taking the Supreme Court's ruling and using it to narrow what counts as protected official conduct. They're drawing lines around specific actions Trump took and saying, nope, that wasn't official, that was personal, that was political, that was outside the scope of presidential duties, and therefore that can absolutely be prosecuted under existing law. It's like the Supreme Court gave Trump a shield, but the shield has holes in it, big holes, and prosecutors are aiming right at those holes with everything they've got. This is not what Trump expected when he celebrated that ruling. This is not what his legal team planned for when they popped champagne. They thought the immunity ruling would be a blank check, a get out of jail free card that covered everything he ever did. But that's not how it's playing out in the real world. The courts are being much more surgical in their analysis, much more specific in their rulings, much more willing to say, yes, immunity exists for certain things, but no, it doesn't cover this particular thing you did. And that brings us to where we are right now in this ongoing legal saga. Criminal trial proceedings are moving forward, despite everything. Judges are setting schedules. Motions are being decided. The legal path toward an actual trial, with actual evidence presented to an actual jury, is becoming clearer by the day. Now, will Trump actually end up in a courtroom while he's president? That's a complicated question with a lot of constitutional implications that legal scholars are debating. But the point is, the legal foundation for that trial is being built right now as we speak. The immunity defense that was supposed to make all of this go away forever, it's not working the way Trump hoped it would. The Supreme Court ruling that he celebrated as a total incomplete victory is being used against him in ways he probably never anticipated in his worst nightmares. So what does this mean for Trump going forward? What does this mean for the presidency as an institution? What does this mean for the idea that no one is above the law in America? Those are the questions we're going to dig into today, because this story isn't just about one man's legal troubles. This is about fundamental questions of power and accountability that will shape American democracy for generations to come. If a president can be prosecuted for actions taken while in office, that changes everything about how we think about executive power. If a president cannot be prosecuted no matter what they do, that also changes everything in ways that should terrify us. And right now, the courts are actively deciding which version of America we're going to live in. So let's break down exactly what the Supreme Court ruled. Let's look at how lower courts are interpreting that ruling. And let's talk about what happens next in this incredible legal saga. Stay with me. Okay, so let's really dig into the details of what's happening here, because the legal nuances are actually pretty fascinating when you break them all down piece by piece. So back in the summer of 2024, the Supreme Court issued its landmark ruling on presidential immunity in the case known as Trump versus United States. This was one of the most anticipated and consequential Supreme Court decisions in modern American history. Legal experts have been waiting for this one for months. The question at the heart of the case was simple but profound. Can a former president be criminally prosecuted for actions taken while in office? Trump's lawyers argued absolutely not, under any circumstances. They said the president has absolute immunity for anything done in an official capacity. They said allowing prosecutions will paralyze future presidents, make them afraid to make tough decisions, open the door to politically motivated revenge prosecutions by future administrations looking to settle scores. It was a sweeping argument for almost unlimited presidential protection from criminal liability. And you know what? The Supreme Court partially agreed with them. The court ruled that presidents do have immunity for official acts for things done as part of their core constitutional duties. That was a win for Trump, a big win that he celebrated loudly. It meant that certain categories of conduct, like Trump's interactions with Justice Department officials about election fraud claims, couldn't be used as evidence against him in court. The prosecution couldn't point to those conversations and say, look, this proves Trump knew he was lying about election fraud. Those official communications were protected under the immunity framework. But, and this is the crucial part that got completely lost in all the celebration on Trump's side, the Supreme Court did not give blanket immunity for everything a president does. The court explicitly said that immunity does not extend to unofficial acts. It does not cover personal conduct. It does not protect a president who steps outside the boundaries of official duties and engages in private schemes or political machinations for personal benefit. The court sent the case back to lower courts with very specific instructions to figure out line by line and allegation by allegation which specific actions in the indictment were official and which were unofficial. And that's where things started to go sideways for Trump in a big way, because when judges actually sat down and looked at the specific allegations with fresh eyes, they found that a whole lot of what Trump allegedly did falls into the unofficial category that isn't protected at all. His conversations with private lawyers about challenging election results, not official presidential conduct, his pressure campaign on state officials to find votes or change outcomes, not official. His coordination with outside allies to organize fake electors in multiple states, definitely not official by any stretch. His public statements and tweets encouraging supporters to fight the results, not official presidential conduct either. So while Trump got to knock some evidence out of the case, a significant portion of the alleged criminal conduct remained fair game for prosecution. And here's what's been happening in the months since that ruling came down. Prosecutors have been methodically rebuilding their cases around the unofficial conduct that isn't protected by immunity. They've been filing new briefs. They've been making new arguments. They've been asking judges to set trial dates and move forward with proceedings. And judges have been responding positively to those requests. They've been issuing rulings that narrow Trump's immunity claims. They've been rejecting his attempts to throw out entire cases based on the Supreme Court decision. They've been saying, look, the Supreme Court told us immunity exists for official acts, but they also told us to examine each action individually. And when we do that careful examination, we find plenty of prosecutable conduct that isn't protected by any immunity. This is not what Trump's legal team expected when they filed their immunity arguments. They thought the immunity ruling would be a knockout punch that ended all the criminal cases forever. Instead, it's turned into a framework that prosecutors are using to continue pursuing charges. Now, I want to be really clear about something important here. The legal situation is genuinely complicated, and anyone who tells you otherwise is lying to you. Trump is currently president of the United States. There's a long-standing Justice Department policy that says sitting presidents can't be indicted while in office. So even if the legal path to trial exists in theory, actually prosecuting a sitting president raises a whole separate set of constitutional questions that nobody has clear answers to. But here's the thing. Trump won't be president forever. His term will end eventually. And when it does, all of these cases that have been moving forward in the background, all of these rulings that have narrowed his immunity claims, all of these legal foundations that prosecutors have been carefully building, they'll still be there waiting for him. The immunity ruling didn't make the cases go away permanently. It just changed the battlefield. It forced prosecutors to be more careful about which allegations they pursue, but it didn't give Trump the blanket protection he wanted and expected. And there's another dimension to this that's really important to understand if you want to grasp the full picture. The Supreme Court's immunity ruling didn't just affect Trump's cases. It set a precedent that will apply to all future presidents for as long as the republic stands. And a lot of legal experts, including some conservatives who you might expect to support broad executive power, are deeply worried about what that precedent means for the future. Because the ruling essentially says that presidents have very broad immunity for official conduct, but it leaves a lot of ambiguity about where the line is between official and unofficial. Future presidents could potentially use that ambiguity to push boundaries, to take aggressive actions, and then claim immunity, knowing that courts will have to sort it out after the fact when the damage is already done. Some critics have called this a roadmap for authoritarian behavior. They say the court has created a situation where presidents can act first and worry about legal consequences later, if ever. Others say the ruling was necessary to protect presidential decision-making from constant legal second-guessing by political opponents. But regardless of which side you fall on, the bottom line is that this ruling has fundamentally changed the relationship between presidents and the law in ways we're only beginning to understand. And for Trump specifically, the ruling has created this weird situation where he simultaneously won and lost at the same time. He won in the sense that some evidence got thrown out and some allegations got narrowed or dismissed. He lost in the sense that the cases are still alive and prosecutors are still pursuing him with determination. He won in the sense that he's president and probably can't be prosecuted while in office. He lost in the sense that the clock is ticking on his term and the legal machinery is still churning away. It's like he's running a race against time, hoping that delays and complications will somehow make everything disappear before it catches up with him. But the judges keep making rulings. The prosecutors keep filing motions. The legal foundations keep getting built brick by brick. And sooner or later, one way or another, there's going to be a reckoning. The other thing worth understanding is how Trump's other criminal cases interact with all of this in complicated ways. The hush money case in New York, where he was actually convicted by a jury of his peers, is going through its own appeals process right now. His lawyers are using the immunity ruling to try to get that conviction overturned, or at least get a new trial. They're arguing that some of the evidence used against him should have been excluded under the immunity framework established by the Supreme Court. Courts are considering those arguments right now and could rule at any time. The Georgia election interference case has collapsed for other reasons that we've covered in previous videos. The federal documents case got dismissed on different grounds entirely, but the core federal election interference case, the one where the immunity ruling originated, that's still lurking in the background. It's been complicated by Trump's return to the presidency, but it hasn't disappeared. The legal questions raised by that case about whether a president can be held accountable for trying to overturn an election, Those questions are still very much alive and waiting to be answered. All right, let's break this down into the key points that really matter here so you can understand exactly what's happening. Point number 1. The Supreme Court's immunity ruling was not the total victory for Trump that a lot of people assumed it was when the headlines first dropped. Yes, the court said presidents have immunity for official acts. That's significant. That's important. But the court also explicitly said that immunity does not cover unofficial conduct, personal actions, political schemes, things done outside the scope of official presidential duties. And when you actually look at the specific allegations against Trump with that framework in mind, a huge portion of them fall into that unofficial category that gets no protection whatsoever. His pressure campaign on state officials to find votes, his coordination with private lawyers and outside allies, his efforts to organize fake electors in multiple states, his public statements encouraging people to fight the election results. Judges are looking at these specific actions one by one and saying, nope, not official, not protected, can absolutely be prosecuted under existing law. So the immunity shield has holes in it, big holes, and prosecutors are driving trucks through those holes. Point number 2. Lower courts are actively using the Supreme Court ruling to narrow Trump's defenses and move cases toward trial as we speak. This is happening right now in real courtrooms with real judges making real decisions that affect real outcomes. Trump's legal team keeps filing motions trying to get cases dismissed based on immunity, and judges keep rejecting those motions, at least in part, saying that the specific conduct at issue isn't covered by the immunity framework the Supreme Court established. Every time that happens, the legal path toward a trial gets a little clearer. The foundation for prosecution gets a little stronger. The timeline for potential accountability gets a little shorter. Trump wanted the immunity ruling to be a wall that stopped everything cold. Instead, it's turned into a filter that lets a lot of stuff through. Point number 3. The question of prosecuting a sitting president remains constitutionally complicated, but Trump won't be president forever, no matter how much he might want to be. There's a long-standing Justice Department policy against indicting sitting presidents while they're in office. That policy isn't law, it's just internal guidance, but it's been respected by prosecutors for decades under both parties. So the chances of Trump actually standing trial while he's in the Oval Office are pretty slim, realistically. But here's the thing, his term ends in January 2029 at the latest under the Constitution. In all of these cases, all of these rulings, all of these legal foundations, they'll still be there when he leaves office. The immunity ruling didn't make the underlying allegations go away. It just changed how prosecutors have to approach them going forward. So Trump is essentially in a race against time. He's hoping that delays and complications and political wins will somehow make everything disappear before he's back to being a private citizen, subject to the full force of the law. Maybe that will work. Maybe it won't. But the cases aren't dead. They're just waiting. Point number 4. This ruling has implications that go way beyond Trump himself and will affect every president who comes after him. The Supreme Court has now established a framework for presidential immunity that will apply to every future president. And that framework is, to put it mildly, controversial among legal scholars across the political spectrum. Critics say it gives presidents way too much protection from accountability. They say it creates incentives for presidents to push boundaries and claim immunity after the fact, when the damage is done. They say it undermines the principle that no one is above the law. Supporters say it was necessary to protect presidential decision-making from constant legal harassment by political opponents. They say presidents need to be able to act decisively without worrying about being prosecuted by future administrations with political axes to grind. Regardless of which side you agree with, the bottom line is that this ruling has fundamentally changed the legal landscape for presidential accountability. Future presidents will be operating under rules that didn't exist before, and we have no idea yet how that will play out. Point number 5. Trump's legal strategy has always been about delay, and that strategy is still working in some ways, but it's not winning in the ways that matter most. Every month that passes without a trial is a month Trump isn't facing a jury. Every appeal that gets filed is another few weeks or months of delay. Every new presidential term is years of protection from prosecution. In that sense, the strategy is succeeding at its immediate goal. Trump has avoided facing criminal trial on the most serious charges despite being indicted multiple times by multiple prosecutors. But avoiding trial isn't the same as being vindicated. It isn't the same as being found innocent. It isn't the same as the charges going away. The allegations are still there waiting. The evidence is still there preserved. The legal frameworks for prosecution are still there established. Trump is like someone running from a slow-moving storm. The storm hasn't caught him yet, but it's still coming. And eventually, the running has to stop. Point number 6. The hush money conviction adds another layer of complexity to everything we've been discussing. Trump was actually convicted in New York. A jury found him guilty. That happened. And now his lawyers are trying to use the immunity ruling to challenge that conviction on appeal. They're arguing that the Supreme Court's framework should have applied and that some evidence should have been excluded from the trial. If they succeed, Trump could get a new trial or even have the conviction overturned entirely. If they fail, he remains a convicted felon. Either way, the immunity ruling is being tested in multiple different contexts simultaneously. It's not just about the federal cases. It's about every case where Trump's presidential conduct might be relevant to the charges. And finally, point number 7. This whole saga raises fundamental questions about American democracy that we're going to be grappling with for years and possibly decades. Can presidents be held accountable for crimes committed in office? Or does the presidency come with built-in protection that makes accountability practically impossible? Is the immunity ruling a necessary safeguard for presidential power or a dangerous step toward authoritarian impunity? When the Supreme Court says presidents have broad immunity, does that make future presidents more likely to abuse their power, knowing that consequences will be limited? These aren't abstract philosophical questions for law school classrooms. They're real issues that are being decided right now in real courtrooms by real judges. And the answers will shape what kind of country we live in, what kind of presidency we have, what kind of accountability we can expect from our leaders. The Trump cases have become a laboratory for testing the limits of American law and American democracy. Every ruling, every motion, every appeal is adding to our understanding of where those limits are. And right now, despite all the delays, despite all the complications, despite all the victories Trump has claimed along the way, the fundamental reality is this. Courts are still finding ways to move forward. Prosecutors are still building cases. Judges are still rejecting blanket immunity claims. The legal system is bending under pressure, but it hasn't broken yet. Whether that's enough to actually hold a president accountable, whether Trump will ever actually face a jury for the most serious allegations against him, that remains to be seen. But the fight isn't over. The cases aren't dead, and the question of presidential accountability is very much alive. The next few years are going to be absolutely critical in determining how this all plays out. Will prosecutors maintain their resolve? Will judges continue applying the law as written? Will the political winds shift in ways that affect these cases? Will Trump find new ways to delay and obstruct? These are questions nobody can answer with certainty right now. What we do know is that the legal framework has been established. The boundaries have been drawn, and despite everything Trump has tried, the path to accountability still exists. All right, that's going to wrap it up for today. This is one of those stories that's going to keep developing for months and years to come. So make sure you're subscribed and have notifications turned on, because every time there's a new ruling or a new development in these cases, you're going to want to know about it immediately. The legal battle over presidential power and presidential accountability is one of the defining fights of our time, and we're going to be covering every twist and turn right here on this channel. I'll see you in the next one.